Hello everybody, and after a long break, welcome back to another video by the Tranquil Domain. I forgot my jacket. Hello everybody, and after a little summer break, welcome back to the Tranquil Domain. Today we're going to be talking to you about a match that just recently happened. I know we don't really talk about way older stuff, but this really caught my interest. I got up early, just happened to be watching live as the top 8 of the most recent Marvel Superheroes Pro Tour was happening. I was watching in the first round, and I said to myself at the end of the first match that I watched, was that the greatest match of Limited that I've ever seen in the history of Magic the Gathering? Let's check it out. So Ken is playing a green-black deck that has a lot of removal, and the draft was kind of crazy. They showed it. I was surprised by a lot of the picks that he chose to make. I do think that it leans towards the thinking that some of the better players I've heard say, which is despite the stats and everybody talking about how great that white is, and of course white-blue is doing really well, that it's blue that makes that so strong, and that's why he decided to have that as his main splash. But he got a little greedy with his mana base. But if we want to talk about greedy splashes, let's go over to Timo's deck. Timo, who the whole morning, I don't know if anybody else knows who Weasel 1991 is. He's a poker streamer, been around for a long time. I kept calling him Buff Weasel. He does look like Buff Weasel, am I right? But anyway, moving on, not trying to make fun of the guy, he did a great job. Timo's deck was blue-white, standard stuff, looks like a Pro Tour version where you have to play a little bit of the worse things than what you would normally want to have in your blue-white draft deck. And then the greedy splash, which definitely will come into play over the course of this match, splashing the double red Thor, God of Thunder. He does have some amount of basic land cyclers in this deck in order to get to his red. He has a red-blue duel, he has a couple mountains, but we will see that double red casting cost over and over again as something that matters in this match. So let's get to what might be the greatest limited match I have ever seen. I got the detailed notes right here. I'm gonna check them out and talk to you about them. First off, as always, intense walkout by the boys here. We got Marshall and Paul in the booth, and even they mentioned this first interesting play, and that's choosing to leave up a counter spell. And I think that it kind of affects the way that this whole game plays out, that he didn't just go for a spell. They made it seem like it was this amazing play that he was doing. He was also leaving up Spider-Woman at the same time, so it's really not that shocking that he made the play, but he did choose to make the play rather than tapping out. Next thing we see is Timo has a Trickster's stratagem that he decides he's going to use all of his mana to power up a brawler instead of using the stratagem right away. I think that that's something we see a lot. Like when I play online and I'm at the lower ranks, sometimes I'll see people that they see a creature, they got a removal spell, they got to use it, but that is not what's happening. There's some high level magic going on here in this match. So we're doing good plays, following up with good plays. It's we're setting up to head in the right direction, you can tell already, but it's the Pro Tour top 8, of course we are. The next major play that stuck out to me, Ken plays a Cloak and Dagger and decides to go after Bold Biochemist. I think that shows that he knows that this game is going to be a long one. And I have found, I won a bunch of, like sick brag, I won a bunch of boxes of Marvel Superheroes. I've been playing a whole lot of this format, and I found that the things that draw you cards, usually people are pretty evenly matched. And if there's one person that can get way ahead on cards, doing things like Founder's Forge, I think that's what it's called, the Forge, the blue thing that draws you cards, and Biochemist and other ways that you can cycle through your deck or draw extra cards, just raw cards. It makes a huge difference, especially the longer the games are going to be. And I think they're settling in to realize that this is going to be a series of very long games, which starts to make the double red splash not look so crazy because hey, you're going to have time to draw your 2 red sources, and then you're going to have this incredibly high impact spell that buys back an instant or sorcery, does extra damage on top of letting you recast one of probably your removal spells. We'll see. The next thing, like I said, I have been playing a lot of this format, and I have to admit it kind of hurt my heart. I had to make a little admission that I normally play Captain America, whichever version of Captain America comes with the trusty shield on him. I forget what he's called. I'll put it up on the screen. I usually play that just as a 4/4 for 4. And Timo moves that trusty shield around more than anyone I have ever seen, and I've been doing it ever since I saw this match. And what do you know, moving equipment around makes a difference in a game where most of the creatures are pretty evenly matched. Then we see our first real next level play. Timo casts a Trickster's stratagem, leaving 2 mana up, thinking that he's been playing around a counter the entire time, and knowing that they're gonna have to tap a creature in order to do the teamwork, and he's got a supervillain lockup in his hand that he is excited to use on that creature. Now Ken chooses, I do not know why, I'm sure he could explain it and make it make sense, but he chooses to do it with his Cloak and Dagger rather than his Herbie, and then the Cloak and Dagger gets removed, the Biochemist gets returned to hand. Because Ken was playing so much defense in this match, this was a really good way to be able to use Supervillain Lockup rather than having it just stuck in his hand while Ken's creatures stayed untapped for a really long time and didn't do anything. After that, we see Timo tank for a while on a later turn, and he really, you can think about the thought process. He's trying to decide, is it time for me to start grinding down this board? If I can keep us, if we can at least have equal draws for the rest of the game, and I keep moving the shield around, am I going to be the one who comes out on top in the end after we trade a million creatures in a row? And he decides yes, and that's what he starts doing. He starts mounting up the shield and swinging in, forcing Kenji to block, or forcing Ken to block over and over again. Sorry if I called him Kenji some other times in here. That's not who it is. Ken really doesn't draw anything amazing. We see a Burrow backup get drawn later on, and he just continues to trade flyers, trade everything that he can, and he's always wearing the shield, so he's kind of trading up with his creatures in order to take care of things. Then we get down to the most important trade of the entire game, where Timo mounts up his shield onto a powered up brawler. Then he swings in, forcing Ken to give him a bunch of life through lifelink and also get his one big toughness blocker that remains off the board, leaving the game state pretty squarely in the hands of Timo to win here, unless Ken draws something amazing. Then, in a theme that we will see repeated here, it looks like we see a top deck by Timo that's going to completely end the match with a shield flying car, but it's responded to by a top deck by Ken where he draws a claw, where he keeps him from being able to ambush any creatures with the flying car, still getting advantage from the flying car, eventually being able to mount up his shield and win game one. So Timo takes down game one after we have a back and forth. And again, at the end of the game, we had an exciting time where it looked like one person, not again, but for the first time. For the first time in this match, we have an exciting time towards the end of the game where it looks like one person does an amazing top deck, the other person gets their own amazing top deck, and we move on to kind of back to parity, except for that plan of slapping on the shield and beating down really worked out in the long run for Timo in this first game. Moving on to game two. All right, game two is our least even game of the entire match, where Ken kind of just beats him down. Ken has his turn 3 Cloak and Dagger again, and he chooses to take a Helicarrier strike so that there's no removal on the other side of the board. Ken's deck is full of removal. He already has removal for the threats that he would need to worry about if he didn't have it, and then he top decks a Coming of Galactus, lands the Coming of Galactus, and it really puts him really far ahead. A really good draw by his opponent is Murdoch's Crusade, which allows him to teamwork it, kill a Spider-Woman who is locking down his pumped up Brave Brawler, and kill Galactus, the Coming of Galactus, at which point in time we get what I think might be historically the first ever funny joke, at least in my judgment, a funny joke by Marshall, where he said, "I just got a text from Galactus," and he says he can't make it. Give it up for Marshall, everybody. Give it up. He tries to make a very aggressive attack that's going to get rid of his opponent's Kang by him powering up, but once he spends the mana to power up, he gets Supervillain Lockup. And in this game, Timo has no red to play his Greedy Splash of Thor, which of course he draws. And while you're busy not drawing mountains, you're going to draw Thor, am I right? And we never really moved back from that point. Ken just extends his advantage and wins game two. So game two, now we're 1-1. Game two going to Ken. All right, so at the beginning of game three, Timo has Island, Plains, Mountain, he has Thor, and he has Monica Rambeau, which can become Photon, the something, the untargetable, the hexproof 4/4 that gives everything counters whenever you cast a spell, that also has, what's it called? Prowess. Ken plays a Death Toucher, and because he wants that Death Toucher to have an effect, he chooses to use one of the 3 removal spells that he has in his hand, Frozen in Ice, to take out the Raft Security Officer, which is a questionable play. I think it's probably fine because you want your Death Toucher to have maximum effect, but it is just something that we can think about as far as the plays go in this match. He does also, one of those 3 removal spells is Web Up, which he does not have white mana for. Okay, so Timo misses his 4th land drop, so he has to cycle an Aim Scientist in order to get a Plains, his second Plains, because he basically has to decide between Do I want on 5 to be able to cast Photon, or do I want on 5 to be able to cast my Thor? Being able to cast Photon is very good. So is Thor, but if you also have the double white, then it gives you the opportunity to double spell later on with white spells, which these games are going really long. It seems very possible that's going to be important. So that's what he chooses to do. Obviously, not getting that second red is going to matter. Like we said, it's a greedy splash. If anything goes not perfect with a greedy splash, it winds up mattering at some point in the game. Then they start playing the Ken is obviously leaving up a counter game. Timo leads with Captain Marvel instead of leading with Photon. That's allowed to be cast. Ken decides he's not going to cast Kang so that he can leave up the mana for the counter. Then Timo thinks for a long time. You can tell he's trying to decide, like, well, okay, so if I don't do it, what's going to happen? If I do it and it gets countered, what's going to happen? He goes for the Photon, it gets countered, and then we see Kang hit the board. Later on, there's a turn where there's an opportunity to either play Echo, which is a sideboarded in card by Ken, or to play Spider-Woman. Ken decides to go for Echo, like, not using his mana with perfect efficiency, but hoping to be able to get double effects on things like Kang and Spider-Woman as the game goes forward. Here we see a great series of plays where each person is out-tricking the other person. Kang attacks in, Echo doubles the effect. They're both lands, so therefore Timo can play Super Suit on his pumped-up Brawler and try and block and kill. He successfully untaps it. He does not get to declare it as a blocker because the Spider-Woman is able to be paid for by Ken. So we have response to response to response. I mean, these games are good. These are good games. Ken's Kang gets supervillain lockup, but then he draws a Gorilla and doubles the effect, which I would not have thought to do. He doubles the effect using Echo so that he can kill the Super Suit and the lockup, and that really swings the board. Timo later on is looking like he doesn't have anything going on. Then he rips off the top of the deck a Bold Biochemist, and that draws him into Trickster's Stratagem and Murdoch's Crusade. And now going from looking like we didn't have a game going, we got a game going again. So then on a later turn, Timo has 7 mana, casts Captain Marvel, and does not cast Murdoch's Crusade because he knows that if you're going to kill my Captain Marvel on your turn or cast a creature or anything like that, I'm going to be able to cast this sorcery as if it were an instant. That's exactly what happens when Ken casts a web up, targeting his Captain Marvel, and then the Murdoch's Crusade takes out the Kang, takes away the card filtering advantage that Ken had, and pretty much sets the board state very much in Timo's direction. Then Timo draws the second red, is able to cast Thor into a bought back Crusade, which can kill Spider-Woman. Beautiful stuff. But even with that bad of a thing happening to Ken, he makes a very heads up play where he could have blocked a 2/2 with a 4 toughness creature, but he had a feeling that the Thor was coming. He even grabbed Timo's graveyard and started looking through it to figure out what he was going to have to deal with. And he didn't want that extra 2 damage from the Thor effect to be able to kill a second creature, so he let the damage through. But then on Timo's next turn, he has Trickster's Stratagem, as we mentioned from the Bold Biochemist before, and that's enough to just put him over the top. Timo wins the game. 2-1 Timo. This game starts off pretty simply for this format, where, like a lot of the time, you wind up having somebody attacking with a 2/1 into your 2/2. You decide not to block because they have white and 1 or more open, and then the board kind of fills up with durdles. He did have the Take Up the Shield that Ken was trying not to get blown out by. I know that a lot of the time when people are playing in Limited, they might think, it's just a gorilla. I'll go ahead and make him use the pump spell right now, and then later on in the game, he won't have it. Ken did not want to do that. He just took the damage, let the life gain happen by the Brawler, and the spell winds up still being in his hand much later on in the game. Then we get to the point in the game where Ken locks down the powered up Brave Brawler with a Spider-Woman, and then they just take turns playing 5 mana flyers and getting them removed by their opponent. Timo, yet again, has 1 red source and a Thor in his hand, but this time Ken draws Coming of Galactus and is able to remove one of his creatures and start dealing some damage, and that Galactus is coming, and if it gets to attack, it's going to be able to kill the 1 red source that he already has and make it so that he never gets to cast that Thor, or at least not for a long, long time. When Ken plays the Coming of Galactus, that gives 3 turns where Crusade could be drawn. Murdoch's Crusade could be drawn by Timo, and he'll be able to take out a Spider-Woman or a Kang and that enchantment. They trade removal and attacks again. Ken is at 9. Timo is at 19. As was fairly easily predicted by the hands, the Galactus does come into play. It does swing for 16 and destroy a mountain, but before it can deal the 16 damage, it gets super villain lockup, but not until after it has destroyed the only red source on the board, with Timo having a double red bomb in his hand. Then Ken gets attacked down to 5. Ken draws Cruel. What is it? Cruel something. The thing that gains you 3 life and exiles a creature, so he manages to gain 3 of that life back, drops a Kang, gets the Kang removed using supervillain lockup, and then takes out the supervillain lockup with a gorilla, so it's just back and forth every game. Timo, at the end of Ken's turn, plays a ghost, which he sideboarded in, and then manages to strap a shield onto it and slam, but Ken still has web up in his hands. Again, I'm going to mention something that I mentioned before, that these pros, the things that make them so good, the things that make this match so good, is knowing exactly when it's time to turn the corner and start being aggressive. Because there is a turn where Ken plays a Wakandan Royal Guard, puts 2 guards on an active secret scroll, the thing that makes mana. It looks like, okay, now he's got big, wide defenses and a low life total. He's gonna just chill, but he activates a Quinjet and smashes, takes the life totals to 18 to 6, and then web ups the ghost. I would not have turned the corner when Ken turned the corner, but Ken had the feeling he sees the future, you know? Then Ken continues to jam with everything, and just for a little extra salt in the wound, he gets, not only does he draw a big fat Rocks and Brutes with Menace to make sure that he's gonna be able to get through and win the game, but guess who draws their mountain that they needed the entire game, but couldn't get it in time. So Ken wins game 4, we're off to game 5, and it's gonna be a good one, I promise. Timo knows it's about to be a good one, so you see him before the game even starts, bust out a 10 of Zins and pop a performance-enhancing drug in his lip. Ken mulligans, and Timo decides he's gonna keep a hand that only has a blue and a red source. So it could go very wrong, except for the fact that I think the first like 5 draw phases in a row, Timo draws land. So it starts going wrong the other way. Oh yeah, that opening hand also had 3 5-drops, one of which was Thor. His first 2 draws, planes, like a pro. Ken miscounts his mana on an early turn, thinking that he can play Kingpin's Enforcer because he has one of those duels where you have to have like a basic or it has to have come into play that turn. He does not have any basics to go along with it, so he doesn't actually have black mana on that turn and winds up not casting it for quite a while. It's not like sketchy. I'm not accusing him of anything. It's not like that thing that happened with the on the Pro Tour landfall.
I would like to tap my mana differently. That's all.
And Nathan's
yeah,
saying,
of course.
my owner road, and Larson says, wow, you
How
do
did you
have
tap
it.
your wide mana?
That was sketchy. A little bit of tight play early in the game. You see Timo just go ahead and use a supervillain lockup on a gorilla because he knows that the gorilla is going to be able to take out the supervillain lockup if he uses it on anything else. Then he plays his first 5-drop, which is not the Thor. His second 5-drop gets taken from him because Ken top decks a Claw at a perfect time, and he gets to look at 2 cards out of the 3 cards that are in his hand, which are Land, Captain Marvel, and Thor. So he decides not to show the Thor. So Ken knows, if I'm looking at a Captain Marvel that I get to take with this Claw, that other card gotta be something really good. You haven't cast it yet. It's pretty safe to assume that he knows it's a Thor. So now Ken has made him discard one of his 5-drops. He has killed another one of his 5-drops, and he still has Coming of Galactus left in his hand. So now we can cast the Thor, but we wouldn't be able to keep it safe, and it seems pretty obvious that Ken has removal. So we start top decking some things that aren't lands. He starts off with an Ultron drone, which he pumps up or powers up on the turn that it comes into play. Then Ken plays a Wakandan Guard, pumping itself rather than taking out the Ultron drone with Coming of Galactus. Then he plays the Captain of America with a shield, immediately moves the shield again onto his Ultron drone, attacks. Life totals are Ken 8, Timo 14. Then Ken draws an Hour of Defeat, so now he has 2 removal spells in his hand along with that Kingpin Enforcers that he could not play earlier when he tried to. Again, not as bad as Pro Tour Landfall, but hey, who cares? Who cares about that? You know what I mean? It's not like that kid did something sketchy having to do with a judge this tournament too. Then we'd really have a problem.
Why would my opponent be able to get outside assistance for that? He tapped his mana. There's no reason why he can't do that.
Then on Timo's turn, he draws Take Up the Shield. So now he has enough mana to cast Thor and take up the shield into 2 destroy spells. So he's looking pretty good. He attacks with his shield-holding Ultron drone, gets a block sack. That's why block with claw, sacrifice it to draw an extra card. That's why Ken played the Kingpins Enforcers on his turn, so that he would be able to get the extra card out of it. Maybe even gain some life if something real emergency style happened over the course of that turn. Then passing back the turn to an opponent who has 2 spells that say destroy target creature, which he cannot afford to cast both in one turn, and him having Thor in play, we see Thor, which return nothing in play. We see Ken draw and immediately play, what's it called? We see Ken draw and immediately play Frozen in Ice for a top deck of the gods. But then he uses that Zen power, that nicotine power, in order to draw himself a Photon Living Light right off the top, and kind of never looks back after that point. So we have another game 5 of this match is decided again by I top deck, you top deck, I top deck, you top deck. There's a little bit of defense played after the Photon is drawn, but between take up the shield, I mean, Ken makes a beautiful play casting Hour of Defeat in response to the Photon so that he thinks that he has the take up the shield in his hand and he isn't going to have the chance to use it and put a +1/+1 counter on everything using Photon's ability, but still that's not enough, and Timo, through the power of Zen, takes it down. And my question for you at home, first off, is are you liking and subscribing? If not, why not? Go ahead and do it. But comment below, was this the best match of Limited maybe we've ever seen? I gotta shout out Wizards of the Coast. I know sometimes we give them a hard time on here, but these last 2 Limited sets, Secrets of Strixhaven and Marvel Superheroes, have been fantastic. And I'm not just saying that because I won a giant stack of boxes of each. Thank you very much for watching this. Sorry that we took a little break. There's a little something called the World Series of Poker that was going on, so we didn't make any videos for a little while, but we're gonna get back to it, and we hope that you enjoyed this one. Thank you, and thank you, patrons.